What's going on, everybody? Coach Mike here with the Strength Coach Thoughts podcast. I'm here in the gym, of course. Where else would I be? Before we get started today, as always, I have these headbands on. If you like these headbands, they are vertical athletics headbands. They are active cooling headbands. You get them wet, you wring them out, shake them around a little bit, and they actively cool on your head. I don't know where you're all at or where everybody's listening to this from, but I'm here in San Antonio, Texas, and we're seeing high 90s, 100-degree days, especially when I'm out here working out. So these headbands have been awesome for trying to keep me cool and keeping all that sweat off me and um, just helping me not overheat here in the garage. That's not insulated. It's just an open garage, you know? So verticalathletics.com, use code Coach Mike for 15% off your order. Additionally, we did it, y'all. We are here. We've arrived. The merchandise was at my door on Thursday. So, for the first time on the Strength Coach Thoughts podcast, if you want to get your C4 energy drinks, use code Coach Mike 311 at c4energy.com. Yes, that's right. We are officially an affiliate partner of C4 Energy. So, before we go any further, cheers, boys. Oh, never disappoints. All right. So, today, Strength Coach Thoughts podcast. So, I know these are still kind of new. These aren't really blowing up yet. But I'm gonna keep hammering at my thoughts, right? And that's all these are. These are my thoughts as a educated person with a ton of experience in strength and conditioning. Literally, with my new job, now I've done everything there is in strength and conditioning and fitness, right? So, I've done high school, I've done college, I've done performance center, private performance center from youth all the way through professional. I've done professional football. I've done collegiate. I've done tactical, and now I've done corporate, being at Crunch Fitness. So I have checked every box that I can think of there is in fitness or strength and conditioning. If you guys know of one that is not teaching, which we'll get into that in a whole another time. But let me know, and we'll see what happens. So, but what I'm talking about today is the functional fitness, right? And I'm just putting that as air quotes as a general term. I guess I'm talking more about the concept of functional fitness. The gurus that are like, I know I went into this before about optimal movement and are we as fragile as they're letting us to believe, but I'm talking more of now of like, the Mike Boyles of the world or the knees over toes guys or the Goda people or all these nonsense people that are, putting nonsense out there just in the frame of functionality, right? We should never bilateral back squat because there's never a time that we're producing force off both feet. Like what? We're always in a unilateral pattern, walking, running, whatever. Like, okay, sure, fine. We also know that the body isn't that segmented. We also know the nervous system isn't that segmented. That if we train one limb and we don't get to the other limb, or if we do 10 reps on one leg and we do 8 reps on the other leg, like it's not like we didn't balance the body out. We know that the body's not that stupid. We know that the nervous system, the muscles, the body's going to adapt to that imbalance, right? So I'm also talking about those people using those weird log things to do all the, cross myofascial line, crossover symmetry, whatever stuff. But I'm also talking about the concept of functional fitness. Okay, so at the core, it is fitness that allows you to function in your everyday life. Okay, so 9 times out of 10, this is looking at abnormal movement patterns just to mimic stuff that may come up, right? So, but we're excluding major movement patterns. A lot of times the functional fitness world is going to focus on mobility and flexibility and stretching and all that stuff, and then focus on balance and stability in weird positions. You're going to see them on a Bosu ball. You're going to see them on like unstable training platforms, different stuff like that, right? And their argument is you're developing stabilizing muscles, but the research shows that you're developing stabilizing muscles in an environment we're never going to be in. This is the same thing with the sand training, right? You're getting really good at producing power through a mode that you're never going to produce power through, right? So it's this, the whole sand training that was really popular a couple years ago, we now know is kind of nonsense, because the whole point of a speed training is power production, and you're trying to produce power into sand, which naturally gives away. So you're not getting that power response back from the ground. So you're not getting the feedback from the power you're putting in. So if you want to train, athletes to be faster or more agile, stuff like that, put them on the turf, put them on the grass, put them on like the surfaces they're actually going to be on. Right. But anyway, that's the same argument that I'm going to make with the functional fitness, right? We're taking these general population people, right? Let's say Gen Pop, and we're putting them through functional fitness. Now, we're avoiding bilateral squats. Let's just take that as the example, because they're not ready to bilateral squat. Okay, I hear you. Let's say this Gen Pop person weighs like 300 pounds, about right around 6 foot, 35% body fat, 40% body fat. They're not healthy, right? They're not strong. They're not in shape. They're not athlete by any means. Okay. So you're telling me that instead of let's work with lightweight, let's work with body weight, let's work with barbell, stuff like that, with squats or goblet squats or something like that, we're gonna put them in some weird foam like Bosu ball, whatever, something, instead of just bilateral back squat them, because we don't want to squat them because they can't handle it. Let me ask you this: what happens when they stand up from the toilet? Both feet should be planted on the ground, nice and firm. They're going to engage their musculature and stand up from probably a 90-degree hip and knee position, which last time I checked was a squat pattern. It was a bilateral squat pattern. Now, this is not to make the argument. I understand loading versus unloaded. That's not the conversation we're having. The conversation I'm having is we're doing all these functional things like, the TRX suspension stuff, the little log stuff you're swinging around with water in it to improve stability or something, whatever nonsense, right? Instead of just focusing on the basics. Excuse me. The basics are what works every time. You cannot find me a person in the world that will not benefit from just doing the basic movements in a progressively overloaded fashion, right? A basic 3x5 squat, deadlift, overhead press. I won't say bench press. I mean, sure, bench press, but I'd rather them overhead press to start with, and then eventually we can bench press to look cool. But bench press doesn't have a lot of functionality to it. There you go. There's your functional fitness. It's not very functional to lay down on your back and push weight away from you. It is more beneficial, and you are working similar and more muscles with an overhead press, and you're grounded to the ground on 2 feet, where we function 99% of the time is, in space on 2 feet. So I'm just confused, because when we say functional movement or functional fitness or functional whatever, as long as we're developing musculature, we're creating new innervations into that musculature, and we are recruiting that musculature, how is something not functional versus functional? If I can function with it in my day-to-day life, how is that different than the functional exercise? So I think if you're keeping up with me, you know what I'm getting at here. There is no such thing as functional or non-functional exercise. There is no such thing as functional or non-functional movement, right? If you are developing musculature and developing bone density, improving ligament and tendon quality, that way, we're a little bit more resilient to injury. We're never preventing injury, but we could just be a little bit more resilient to it, be a little bit more ready when it comes. How is that not functional? How are there only specific things that are functional movement now? And I can tell you why. It's marketing. It's people that, wanted to put their name on something, so they said some outrageous stuff, and now they sell you a certification, which, take my $1,500 certification and I'll teach you how to be a functional movement expert. Plot twist. They're showing you a bunch of nonsense that doesn't work for 90% of people. And they're leaving out the stuff that does work, which is the basic stuff you learn in any basic program. I know I'm doing a podcast. I'm starting to get some little traction with, sponsorships, all that fun stuff and whatnot. But I say this now. I'm not going to know what's going to happen if I'm presented that opportunity, but I would like to think I'm not going to sell out. And I don't want to be a grifter. I don't want to turn into one of these grifters. And I know Zach Terlander does a lot of videos on fitness grifters out there, and I could sit here and name a bunch. And I can name a bunch of people that aren't necessarily grifters, but the fact that you're still trying to sell me something and your narrative revolves around what you're selling me. Not saying you're intentionally a grifter, but hey, I mean, if the shoe fits. So I'm not going to be sitting here telling you like, my way is the best way, my way is the only way. I'm just posing this podcast. I'm using this podcast as a way to just pose thoughts that I have in my head. So as a strength coach, I'll sit there and listen to some conversations. I'll listen to podcasts. I'll listen to trainings, courses, stuff like that, and I'll hear stuff that stands out to me that just doesn't make sense to me. That's what this is. So the functional fitness thing just doesn't make sense to me. Any movement we do that is eliciting change in our body is a functional movement. Therefore, all movements are functional movements within reason. I mean, I can't think of an exception, but like there's functionality behind movements. So if it helps you in your day-to-day life to be a little bit stronger, a little bit more cardio based, a little bit more flexible, a little bit more, poppy, so you have a little bit more power, that's functional movement. So the Goda movement where it's like, your joints have to be in perfect angles, Joel Seedman, all his nonsense, um, all of that stuff is just grifts. Like it's just people selling you stuff. Joel Seedman famously, every time he's asked to cite his sources, he says, "Buy my book." It's like, sorry to tell you, man, your book is not a source. Like that's not how this works. And he has a doctorate, should know that. Doctorate from Alabama, I believe, should know that. But just understanding that, like, I don't have a script on these. I don't really know. I'm just going on tangents. I'm just going off the rails. But these are things that just don't make sense to me. And the functional movement, functional fitness one is one of those. Now I'm not saying this is the same as corrective exercise, right? So corrective exercise is looking at areas we have weakness, right? So let's say I have a coordination weakness, okay? My corrective exercise, maybe bird dogs, dead bugs, stuff like that, to improve coordination of limbs, to improve my core coordination. So, am I able to brace my core and move my limbs in isolation without losing either one? And I'm going to do that for a time, but then once we're there, we're there. I don't need to keep doing it. I don't need it in my program forever because we corrected it. That is the point of corrective exercise. So the functional fitness thing is like the people that say that is the only way to train is functionally, right? It is. If you don't know what the functional fitness is, feel free to look it up. I mean, give them their views, I guess. But it's just a lot of nonsense, And I guess just to pad time here, because I'm only halfway through this podcast, I'm gonna loop in, or I'm gonna group in with the functional fitness. I'm gonna group in the sport specific nonsense too. And you heard me absolutely correct, nonsense. I'm gonna be the first to tell you, if I'm not the first to tell you, but I'm gonna be one to tell you. Sport specific strength and conditioning is bullshit. It's a grift. People selling you sport specific training are doing the same basic training, but they're probably mimicking it to look like your sport, mimicking your sport, right? You don't need to be dribbling medicine balls to get better at basketball. You don't need to be doing, explosive punches with a landmine to get better at football. What will get you better at those things is, again, the basic movements, developing strength, taking that base of strength and eliciting power from that strength of base, because we need to innervate, we need to create those neuromuscular connections now. And then having that extra capacity now, that strength and power capacity from basic strength and conditioning. Now, when we get closer to seasons, we can sprinkle in max speed components with that new base of strength and that new base of power. And all of a sudden, you're better at your sport just because you're more athletic. And I know I've gone into this in another podcast episode. I don't know which one. I can't tell you. But yeah, there's no sport specific. For 99% of the population, I'm talking D1, top D1 athletes too, do not need sport specific training. So your 12-year-old baseball player does not need sport specific training. The best thing that we can do, and this is, I'm glad to see this coming out now in the media, is multi-sport as long as possible. Urban Meyer was talking about it for the longest time. LeBron James is now coming out talking about it. Specializing in sport early, and this is a different topic, but specializing in sport early has been a detriment to athletes. One, it's a huge contributor to burnout. Okay. This is the fastest way to burn your kid out or burn your athlete out, is making them play that sport all year round. Two, now I believe, as my strength coach philosophy is, there's no such thing as like in-season, off-season differences in S&C. Right? There's an old school philosophy that some coaches still follow, where in season is maintenance and off season is production, right? Where we're producing our gains, we're getting stronger, we're getting more powerful. I think that's nonsense. I think if we manage load correctly, we absolutely should be able to get stronger and maintain power in the season, which go back to my episode with Carl Austin. We did that with the D1 women's basketball team and saw phenomenal results, record-breaking results across the board. Not just as far as their season goes, like their season was record breaking in basketball, but by the end of the season, we were still seeing personal records in jump height on the force plates. We were seeing personal records in velocity output on different movements. We were seeing personal records broken in lifts, and this is later in the season. This is at the end of their season after a long basketball season. We're seeing improvements. We saw a decrease in injuries across the board. We covered all that with Carl in my episode with Carl. Go check that out. But you can absolutely and should absolutely get stronger, more powerful in season. But once we start specializing in sports, in season becomes year round, right? Think about baseball. You got travel ball, then you got club ball, then you got, maybe your school ball, maybe you got, whatever you're doing. But you're in tournaments, you're in clubs all year round to get reps and to get exposure and blah, 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 blah. All the while, you're just overusing your injuries, which I know I said there's no such thing as overtraining. That you can overtrain there. But you're just getting overuse injuries with young kids who are now going to need surgeries at earlier ages. We're seeing earlier instances of Tommy John surgery. They're going to get burnt out because they're sick of the sport. They're sick of doing that year round. They're sick of the pressure. They're sick of, they're just not being a kid. They're not having fun anymore. And then additionally, there's no room for development. So they're getting so refined in their skills, but the physical development is lacking. So by the time they hit college ball, they're petering out. If they're a pitcher, they're hitting maybe 80s every now and then, maybe getting in 90s, but they don't have the strength and power through their musculature to be able to produce the power behind the velocity behind the ball that's needed. So that's what else we're seeing. So I'm lumping all this together as Grifts, right? So functional fitness, sport specific training, sport specialization, etc. It's all grifting, right? It's all just people trying to sell you something. And I'm going to be the first one to tell you, if not, hopefully, I'm going to be one to tell you. You don't need to pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for sport specific training for your 12-year-old hyper specialized baseball kid, right? The best thing you can do for that athlete is make them an athlete. Put them in multiple sports throughout the year, and they're going to improve their athleticism, which is going to help them improve their sport, right? That is the best thing you can do. Because, again, as I mentioned, the sport-specific coaches are just going to do the basics that we do with everybody else. They're just going to market it and tie it up in a nice little bow a little bit differently for you to make you think it's specific to your sport. Every sport needs strength. Every sport needs power. Every sport needs agility, speed, change of direction ability, everything. So my baseball player is going to practice hip turns and accelerations, and my football player is going to practice hip turns and accelerations. But I'm going to say the baseball player needs it, to practice that, first base leadoff, hip turn and go. And the football player needs it for those hip turns to be able to cut effectively, plant and go and break through a hole. It's the same thing. It's the same response. It's the same stimulus, right? It's a grift. I'm just telling you. They need to train like athletes. The best way to train like athletes is introduction to multiple stimulus. What does that mean? That means play multiple sports, get multiple planes of motion going. If you have somebody, a baseball player, okay, cool. Throw them in, basketball, right? So now baseball, they're not jumping a lot. They're just doing a lot of throwing, hitting, etc. Throw them in basketball, make them jump, make them cut, make them, be responsive that way, make them land. There's plyometric work, right? Now we're developing strength in the lower body and the tendons, ligaments, and the musculature of the lower body, right? That's going to elicit the power. Oh, but Coach Mike, basketball season runs into baseball season. It doesn't have to. Really doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. You don't need to start them, start baseball in February when basketball is still going. We don't need to do that. We can keep it spring sports, winter sports, summer sports, fall sports, right? You got a football player, throw him in track and field. You got a lineman on football, throw him as a thrower in the field events. Watch how much more powerful they become, how quickly, right? Multiple stimulus. That's how you're going to develop athletes, and that's how athletes are going to get better at their sport. That's what they do. That's what athletes are. But tying all this back, there's no such thing as functional fitness. The functional fitness is being able to move your body in time and space to do the things you need to do. That is what functional fitness is. The basic movements, basic strength and conditioning will check that box for 99% of people, general population included. Gen Pop will benefit from doing barbell back squats. We've done it for decades. It is not now all of a sudden dangerous. It's all of a sudden dangerous because they want to sell you a certification or sell you physical therapy or sell you chiropractic because gravity, right? I literally had a chiropractor when I was working high school. He was telling my athletes they needed bi-weekly adjustments twice a week because gravity compresses us and we need to adjust for that. It is a grift, ladies and gentlemen. There's no scientific behind chiropractic. There's no scientific evidence behind masseuse. There's no scientific evidence behind any of that stuff. There is a ton of scientific evidence behind progressively overloaded compound movements within certain set rep ranges for whatever response you're eliciting. We have decades of research on that. And it works. It's highly effective for developing athleticism. How do we know? Because we've done it for decades and we see that, right? So all I'm saying, I guess what I'm saying with this, again, this is free flow thought. I don't have a script in front of me. I don't even have bullet points. This is just, I get a topic and I go, which maybe I should start bullet pointing. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you guys like this free flow thought or if I should organize this a little bit. But what I'm wrapping this up, I guess what this has turned into is just this week I had the opportunity of educating our new personal trainers through what we have as PT school, right? We take all of our trainers, we put them through PT school, so we teach them how we want things done. And one of the sections that I had a few sections, but one of the sections that I got to create from scratch was how to tell reliable sources, right? And this is the same thing if you're a coach, if you're a weightlifter, if you're an athlete, if you're a parent watching this, if you're just a random Joe watching this. Hey, thanks. Welcome to the channel. Happy to have you here. I'm Coach Mike. How you doing? Right? But I told him about the crap test, which you can look up the crap test. That's how you see if a source is reliable. But I'm going to finish with this. If somebody is selling you something or there is something to be sold from that person, certification, a method of, a secret mode of training, some kind of hidden knowledge that they only know about, right? Like gravity, that we all of our problems with our spine are because gravity, which amazingly hasn't been a problem for since humans have been on Earth, but now gravity is heavier, so it's a problem. Um, just think about it for a second. Are they telling the truth, or are they trying to get you to buy something? Right? Just take that second, right? I know a lot of podcasts I listen to, but there's like the glucose goddess and like all these people that are they're just grifters. They're just nonsense spewing bullshit, right? And I use the glucose goddess because it's a perfect example. Insulin spikes are bad. We need to be careful with sugar because insulin spikes, right? Plot twist, anything we eat spikes our insulin. That's a natural response in our body. That is our body starting the process of digestion. It is acknowledging that we have food. We need to spike our insulin to start being able to store our food that or our energy that we just brought in, right? And then we decide if we're going to use it as energy or store it as fat. That's the job of our body. That's what it's supposed to do. But oh, by the way, she sells insulin pumps, right? And that's her whole thing is like, we need to have everybody needs insulin pumps because insulin spikes. We need to watch for insulin spikes when we eat. And every time you eat, you should be monitoring this pump for spikes. Well, guess what? I'm going to be the first one to tell you, you're going to see spikes every time you eat, no matter if it's carbs or what. That's natural. I just said how it's supposed to happen. But she sells insulin pumps. So she's telling you glucose spikes are bad. Here's why. And everybody should have it pumped and watch out for these bad things. She's just so happy to be there to sell you those pumps. I'm at least straight up. I'm at the beginning of the episode. If you want your C4, go buy it from me, please. 100%. I drink C4. You guys see me every episode. I crack it open. Cheers. We're sipping on it. I'm going to take a sip right now. If you watch my lifting videos, you see C4 everywhere in there. I'm pounding C4 left and right. I'm not allowed to dry scoop anymore, so sorry. I'm going to stop doing that, but cracking cans open in the camera, drinking that C4 all day. But if you want it, drink it. Use my code. You get a discount. I'll get a little snippet of that. But I'm straight up with you. I'm telling you. I get a little bit. You get a discount. We're all good to go. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, all you need to drink is C4 and you don't need water. You don't need anything else in your life. Just eat and drink that. And oh, by the way, I'm selling it too. And I'm leaving that part out, right? That's what I'm saying. It's just I'm being transparent. I'm being straight up with you. Go buy C4. I like it. I feel the tingles. Is what I like. I like to feel that I'm doing something. If you notice in my podcast, I always start off slow. As I drink, I get more jittery. I get more talkative. That's what I want, right? I want to be more alert, more focused. That's what I like. That's what I like in my energy drink. If you like that, Coach Mike 311, go get you one, right? But going back to the point of the podcast, right? The functional fitness, sports specification, early sports specialization. If people are telling you this and they're offering you the solution, it's a grift. Now, I'm not saying strength coaches are grifting. I'm not saying if a strength coach tells you they can get your kid throwing, 10 miles per hour faster, they probably can. If they're saying that there's only one right way to train and your baseball player needs baseball specific strength and conditioning, that's a grift, right? Just look for the honest ones. Look for transparency. Good strength coaches are not going to bullshit you. Bad or young strength coaches are probably going to bullshit you. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but young coaches are being taught to do that through means of social media and grifters right now, right? So they're just ignorant. They may not know better. But just think of intentions. Think of if they're trying to sell you something. I'm Coach Mike. This is Strength Coach Thoughts. Use code Coach Mike at verticalathletics.com for a little discount off your headbands. Use code Coach Mike 311 at C4 to get you a little discount on some C4 energy products and Cellucor products. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys next time.